Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to this second module of the program. Searching for evidence. As you know, today we are, let's say, deep more in depth into the critical aspect of this program. Indeed, in this module, we are going to embark on a specific journey that is going to uncover the evidence that then can underpin an effective policy making, and also then the aspect about program implementation. We're going to have today the guy. We're going to let's say, have the esteemed guidance of Bavika, Naren as well. And after that, we have the pleasure also to have a specific application listening to the contribution of Bert Müller from EPAP, Employment Policy and Analysis from the ITCI Law. Just a few things before starting, as I know that some of you were dealing with some issues, technical issues, let's say, about the campus. Do not forget, as always, to, let's say, finalize all the assignments and the tasks that are required by each module. We know that some of you are facing few issues, specifically then to have access to the following module. It occurred with the module number 2. We were able to fix it because there was a problem with the deadline. But in any case, we kindly invite you, as always, to make all the assignments and submit all the assignments and the evaluation on time. And thank you again for being here today. And now I'm going to give the floor to Naren, that is going, as always, to introduce the session, reply to some questions that you may have, and then we will be ready to start. Thank you, and over to you, Naren.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all from wherever you are joining us. Welcome to our third day of this training, third session, which will be on how and where would you search for your evidence that you will use in your policy briefs. Bavika will be leading the session today with me. But before we start the session, I just wanted to thank you once again for being punctual and connecting with us and being active on the eCampus platform that I've been monitoring and providing my feedback to you all. And I'm extremely thrilled that most of you have got your policy questions right now. So that's amazing. And that you had posted on the discussion forum your policy questions, the issues that you are most interested in, the issues that you are passionate about, and the issue that you will draft a policy brief on. And that's why we are here to guide you all along this training. And we will give you all the nuts and bolts and the tools and instruments that will be useful for you to draft your policy briefs. I've seen your questions. There were a few questions regarding the previous sessions, which I will answer to you specifically. There were one question by Dulce, I think. She asked, what new areas of evidence should we focus on in the coming years to enhance labor and employment policies, right? Which new areas? Didn't really understood the question with new areas of evidence. Maybe Dulce would want to ask her question again so that I can provide some feedback. And I think Barry had asked a question about whether informal conference and meetings can be considered as part of evidence. Good question, Barry. I don't know what you think. I'll let you decide, but I have my response to that. And Yusuf from Morocco has asked a question about what's the difference between a policy brief and a newspaper article, right? We can talk about that. And then how do you use politics? Warista from Indonesia asking then how we maneuver our way, knowing that evidence has become political. And then, of course, Roka is asking question about what's the difference between qualitative data and the citizens' knowledge. Give us some examples. Of course, we will cover those things. But let me hear from you if you have any other questions or you'd like to reinforce what I've mentioned in terms of asking me again those questions, and then we'll have a brief discussion, and then we will then give the floor to Bhavika. So I'll just leave the floor open to you for any other thoughts, any questions. And for your policy questions, I am in touch with you via the eCampus platform. So unless you have a burning issue here, please do ask. If not, we'll leave that to the eCampus. But just for what we did last week on the introduction to the evidence-based policy making, and what was evidence, why it's political, what are other forms of policy making, avenues. We looked into evidence, emotions, and other things. And your policy question was extremely important, how to design your policy questions. Over to you. Any questions, any comments, any suggestions? Don't be shy. I know it's maybe late in the evening for our people in Asia, but Caribbeans must be waking up with their coffees and teas and lattes or whatever it is.
Naren, I was just trying to ask what future trends of evidence-based policy are emerging right now. That's actually what I was trying to clarify.
So in terms of the future evidence, you talk about the types of evidence or the issues? That's what I was asking myself.
Probably the types of evidence.
Absolutely. Okay, I got you. So in terms of the types of evidence, evidence will still be evidence, whether it's research will continue, we'll still be researching and searching for on issues of new issues that are coming: flexible working hours, violence and harassment, AI and jobs, youth unemployment. Those things will still be there. So research will be still going on. Data will still be used, but there'll be different kinds of data coming. Big data, of course, the surveys, those things will continue, but the data will be, the indicators are being, how could I say, adjusted, and definitions are changed based on the circumstances. Best practice or good practices are getting more and more important, where what is happening elsewhere, and of course you have to change if you want to apply that particular policy in your own country or circumstance. You have to change the things that you need to change, but the idea still remains the same. And I was giving some examples about how some of the policy transfers, for example, on the conditional cash transfer programs, which started in Latin America and Brazil and Mexico, which then generated all over the world, of over 100 countries are having that kind of particular conditional cash transfer programs. The public works program, again, popular everywhere. It started, India has really made a good name out of that, the Mahatma Gandhi rural development scheme or program, what you call, and it has gone to all over the countries if you want to ignite jobs. So the good practices is still there. Of course, the local knowledge or citizens' knowledge, where you go down and do stakeholder consultations to get the information that you need in order to put policies that are relevant to those particular communities. So all these four types, but in terms of how you gather the evidence, of course, we are using a lot of computer-based data, big data, and other things. So I think those elements will stay the same, but the issues might change.
Thank you.
Any others? Yeah. Sadika.
Hi, morning, everyone.
Hey.
I just want to know if any guidelines have been, prepared in terms of, for example, the use of AI, like ChatGPT and Gemini, in terms of using it to, deal with like, for example, triangulating quantitative and qualitative data. Are there any guidelines with regard to that and its use? I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. I think very good question, Sadika. Indeed, with these chat GPTs, the chat boxes, I think all organizations and countries are grappling with what to do, right? It's information is out there. How you use it, in whose name are you going to use it? whether you are allowed to use it, how should you acknowledge it. Those issues are being discussed currently by each organization, each institution. And just to let you know, our organization, the International Labour Organization, has a guideline of how you should be using those chat GPTs, either in drafting papers or even for interview sakes, where you have exams to take. There are guidelines given what to do, what not to do. Universities are putting their own guidelines because this is something new. And indeed, I'm sure in your countries, you will come up with some kind of guidelines on what to do and what not to do with the chat GPTs and AI that the information gathered through those artificial intelligence. Absolutely, Sadika, spot on. This is something, a topic of development. And as I said, in my organization, we have guidelines. And in fact, even for the training purposes, ITC has its own guideline. I've seen that. I'm sure Vincenzo would be happy to explain that in terms of, for the training, what is the guideline in using or doing your assignments. Of course, you have to use it. I mean, if you can use it, that's fine. It's better to use it rather than not to use it. But then there are some certain moral and ethical issues that you have to acknowledge. And I think that's where the debate is. Vincenzo, if you have anything to add on the AI, but if not, we can just move on here.
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, so we also have guidelines. In our case, are much more applied, as you say, to training. Well, I can also just mention that, I mean, working with universities at the ITCLO, as we have also master programs. So in that case, we also combine our guidelines with that of university. So it's, I would say, quite complicated, but I mean, in the near future, well-defined path. But I mean, sure, I mean, we can then further discuss. I don't want to take any time from any further time from Bavika. But I mean, feel free also, if you're interested, we can further explain and discuss it.
Great. Thank you, Vincenzo. I hope that answers your question. Sadika, I see your thumbs up. Great. Thank you. Any other questions? I see Deidra nodding, saying no. All right. What have I noted down? Yeah, politics, data politics will always be the case. And that's why we are giving you the tools to deal with the politics. I mean, today you will see with Bhavika, I mean, that's a good question here. Somebody asked, how would you differentiate which is the better evidence, which evidence products? And that's what we'll be talking about today, whether a newspaper or a conference or informal meetings are considered good evidence or no. But it's in your own judgment you have to make. But there is a pyramid or classification of the strength of evidence we can give you: the systematic review, peer-reviewed journals, gray reports from international organizations, and the bottom will be, YouTubes and blogs and opinion pieces. In middle will be policy briefs, working papers. So we can give you a ranking of the strength, but the best one, as I said, it's peer-reviewed journal, and not any kind of peer-reviewed journal, but it should be well noted. The impact factor, we can talk about the impact factor, but also there's one specific review called the systematic review, and that's the gold star of academic publications. So we can give you a kind of a ranking, but conference and meetings, these are informal evidence that you can't really cite or use. It was said or not said, nobody knows, right? So you have to take it with caution, those things. But anyway, I will leave you with Bhavika now. Bhavika, just to let you know, Bhavika has been working with me for a number of years, and she's an expert trainer now. She will be taking us through how to do methodic search on your particular policy questions that you have. Bhavika, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Naren. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you all for joining today. We have been following your progress on eCampus, and we are very happy to see how you all have drafted your policy questions. And hopefully, you've also had time to review the comments that Naren and I have provided to those. Today, we'll dive into the first step in the evidence-based policy making, which is searching evidence. Now that you have understood what is evidence and what is evidence-based policy making, how do you really implement it at your workplace and in the work that you do? So I'll quickly share my screen. Just a second. All right. So before we move ahead, let's first find out how was your weekend. And we also have provided a few options for you to choose from just to make it fun. A few of you might recognize this person from this American series, which is The Office. If you have, then you would know how it is. It's one of my favorites. If you haven't, then you should try it out. But this first image says that when it's the weekend, but you're a parent, then how much can you expect out of the weekend? That is your first. Second is you can see the face. That how I mean, there could be a few of you who could be feeling that you had to complete ILO assignments through the weekend. Third is a bit on the good side that you found time to watch the TV. And the last one that it just went away in a woof. It was a blink of an eye, and here we are on Monday. So a poll will open, and you'll have to pick between these. So we have a few parents in the group, about 5 of them. Four people have crying faces for completing ILO assignments. We are sorry for that. And the last one, okay, so I think majority, about 10 of you, just did not realize when the weekend got over. It was the same for me. It was the blink of an eye and then it just vanished. And here we are again. Thank you. Thanks, Vincenzo. We can end the poll now. All right. So now let's dive into the first part, searching for evidence. You have already gone through the previous module, which is Introduction to Evidence-Based Policymaking, wherein we understood what is evidence, what are the different types of evidence, where we saw data, citizen evidence, best practices, research, as Naren was just discussing a while ago. And today, what we'll see is what are the different search strategy steps that you can take up to build your policy brief? What are the different types of literature that you come across when you are looking on Google, you are looking on looking across different sources? What are the different types? How can you differentiate literature? What are the different evidence products? And how do you really engage with searching for the evidence that you will require to build your policy brief? Let's first hear from you that what do you do when your boss or colleague asks you to prepare a report or get information on a specific topic? So we have a few options listed out here. Let's first try to find out what is the strategy that you deploy right now. A poll will open on your screens. Vincenzo, it will be the previous question.
Can you see now the poll?
Yes.
Can you see, Barika, the poll? Okay.
I can see it. Yes. Okay, so it's mostly all of the above. Going to the internet, asking Google, consulting a friend or an expert. Personal experiences ranking a bit low, yes. Reading books and research papers. And primarily, it's all of the above. All right. So it's a little bit of everything that one tries to do when they're looking for evidence. All right. Thank you. So if we move forward, we'll see that what is the appropriate strategy that we at ILO look at when we are trying to look for evidence and we have a policy question in mind already. So as you would all know that research essentially means that there is already some work out there on the internet that you can refer to in terms of different websites, different journals, books, which means you need not do the grind work. You need not reinvent the wheel, but you can already go out there, look for different types of evidence and pick the ones which are most relevant to your policy question. This way, a lot of time is saved, yes. You can also have a clear plan in terms of how you would want to break down every step when you are looking at a certain policy issue and how you would try to find evidence in a very responsible and transparent way. It's very important that we discuss about the search strategy because it gives you a systematic way to how to understand evidence and how to use these large amounts of information and synthesize it in a very comprehensive way. For example, the policy question that we were talking about on Friday was that how to ensure social protection for platform workers in India. If I look up that question and I look it up online, I'll find that there is a lot of evidence already worked upon, already researched upon on the internet. There are many researchers who have done their work on it. But when I am looking at that question, what are the different elements that I want to focus on? And that is where the search strategy comes in, that these are the certain areas which are important to me. For example, in the platform workers, because even that area is quite broad, I might limit myself, narrow my area to say employees who are working in the Uber company, the ones in the cab services. And that is where I look at my different steps in the search strategy, that this is the first thing that I have to ensure in my search, that it has to be employees working in that particular sector. And then that is how I move forward with my balanced approach. Now, this is a task for you that if you were to put these steps in the order that you currently follow in terms of your search strategy, then what would that order look like? After this slide, we will tell you the order that we feel is the most appropriate. But for now, if you could look at the slide and try to answer the poll, that what is the correct order that you feel you have followed so far, then that would give us an idea that where are you all coming from right now. Vincenzo, could you please put up the poll?
Can you please confirm that you can see the poll? I've relaunched that. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
great.
All right.
What if my response is slightly different from anything provided?
That could be possible too. Once we are done with the poll, we can discuss what's your order of preference, and then we can discuss that. Sure. Okay, so we have about 20 responses. Majority of you have selected the second one, and we have a few couple selecting first and the third one. All right, we can end the poll now. Thanks, Vincenzo. Okay, so now let's see what is the correct order. The first step in the search strategy is understanding the request for evidence. After which you will familiarize yourself with the topic, followed by using your network to understand more about your topic, choosing the right types of literature, and then choosing your sources. Using all of these steps, finally, you will search effectively. So the ones who have selected option number 2 are actually the ones who have answered correctly. So we had about, I think majority of you, about 17 of you answered the second one. So all of you are doing your research, you're searching the evidence correctly. That's amazing. But before that, before we move forward, let's hear from Dayadra that what is the process that she has followed and what are her thoughts? Please go for it.
Oh, so I selected the second one, just because it was closest to what I was thinking. So I would have maybe swapped out E, for B. So where you have E, I was wondering if B would have been an option there. So DFB.
Okay, so is that between using your network and searching effectively?
Yeah,
Okay, got it. All right.
that was the only difference, but I selected the second one.
Okay, yes, you were right there. You will find that even though this order, the search strategy steps in order is what we recommend, but you'll also find that at times the order might differ. You might come across your interaction with your network first, yes, but this is the preferred order that we recommend to the participants of this training. And this can absolutely happen that you are of course searching effectively along the process that is given so far. But the idea is that whenever you are beginning to do some research, for example, if you already have your policy question in place, these are the steps that you can essentially follow when you begin your research on a given topic. Now we'll see through the different steps. If we go through the first one, which is understanding request for evidence, then this allows us to really go into the details of what is the request, what is one trying to understand. For example, there is a policy question that was posted by Mr. Narendra on the campus that how to minimize child labor in Trinidad and Tobago. So child labor in itself is a very broad topic, right? It might take really long for a person to go through the large amounts of information out there. So, what does one do in that situation is that you understand the one aspect, you narrow down on one aspect that how can probably welfare programs or social protection policy be involved, what could be the role of the state in minimizing child labor, and that is where the request will be clarified. That is where you will find out more about what is it that you are looking for and what is relevant to your research and what is not. This will save you a lot of time. You will have much more clarity in what is the specific question you are trying to answer and what are the types of sources that you can already start to look up. Second step would be to familiarize yourself with the topic. Uh, I think in our group, since most of you are already experts in the areas that you are working in, you have been working in that area for years now, you are already familiarized with the topic that you may have selected. But there could also be participants who are probably stepping out of their comfort zone and maybe working on a topic such as AI. In the beginning, we were discussing about guidelines on using ChatGPT and Gemini. So this is still a topic that is up and coming. It might take a while to familiarize yourself with the topic and what are the key concepts and terminologies that you absolutely should be aware of. So before you dive in, once you have understood the uh, area that you want to zero down on, you begin to familiarize yourself that what are the most uh, important debates in this area? What are the latest debates, or what are the significant stakeholders that you can look into? We'll see an example here on C190, which is Violence and Harassment Convention 2019. Now, one may ask that every country must ratify this convention. It's the common sense says that yes, we must ratify it. But then the question comes that why do the countries not ratify it? Why is it that it is still uh, a topic of discussion, that all the partners have to come together and make that decision? Why does that happen? That is because there are large questions looming, that what will be the impact like? What will be the cost like? And that is why it's important that these particular questions are answered using this step wherein you familiarize yourself with the topic. Now, if you are working on this particular area, which is Violence and Harassment Convention, what you might do is that you can look up the ILO website, you can go to the ILO publications, and you find out the guide on convention number 190. That is how you will understand the basics. This will be your one-stop solution wherein you will find the different terminologies, the different areas of current debate, and you will be able to apprise yourself of all the information that you need just by accessing this one document. So the idea is to familiarize yourself so that whenever you come across any evidence product, you are able to decide whether this is relevant to my policy issue or it's not. And for that, you will have to go through certain documents like ILO publications or publications by other UN agencies, by, say, national institutes in your own country, so that you are led to a specific evidence product that really guides you in the direction of your policy question. Third step would be to use your network. Who is it that you can contact who can provide you the best sources? As we know within this group as well, that there are certain participants from the Caribbean, there are certain participants from Africa. Now, it's quite possible that you are connecting through this channel and you understand the issues that your colleague's country is going through. So what can you do in that case? You can tap into this network. For example, the colleague from South Africa can connect with the colleague from Namibia. And if the challenges are similar, they can engage together, they can discuss, they can try to find out the stakeholders who are relevant in this scenario. What are the best sources that they have come across so far that will help in their research? And this is just one example that you can develop your network on a meeting like this. But other than that, your network would also consist of academic experts. It could be a professor, it could be information experts, or it could be technical experts, that someone who's already working in that area. You can go ahead, speak to that person, and find out more about the topic that you are working on. Lastly, as you see that networks can be virtual as well, as I was saying before, that you can tap into the network that you are creating within this international training as well. Now, this is an exercise which we typically do in our in-person trainings. But the idea over here is that you can also make a mental map that now that you have already finalized your policy question, what are the different network sources or the people in your network that you'll tap into? What are your sources going to look like? What are the contacts that you can request information from? And I'm sure with the years of experience of work that you have, you will find at least one person who is working in the area of research that you are writing your policy brief on. So perhaps you can also take a screenshot of this. Otherwise, we'll be uploading this deck on the eCampus. But this would really save you a lot of time from finding all sorts of information. And in compared to a situation wherein you can just speak to a person who's an expert in that area, and that person can direct you to reliable information, and provide you advice in terms of what sources you can refer to. In this regard, you can also count Naren and myself and people at the ITC ILO who have been working in these decent work issues for quite some time, and we'll be very happy to guide you, direct you to resources that ILO has published so far. So the idea would be to tap into your network and try to build that map, that mental map like you see on the screen, that in the center you will find yourself and you will find that there are multiple sources around you. But you will have to tap into those in order to get the most amount of information in the minimum amount of time that we have currently. Now, this is very essential that it's important that you understand the request for information quickly and strategically familiarizing yourself with the topic. You'll see that these are the first 3 steps of your search strategy. There are also 3 more, but the moment you complete these 3 steps, which is familiarizing yourself with the topic, and understanding the request for the information, and lastly, using your network, you'll see that you will be able to save a lot of time. And then you can use the other part of your time, which is the coming 2 weeks of the training, in really going into the weeds of the information that you will require for your policy brief. And once you have this solid base uh, constructed, you have this foundation in place, you will be able to give more time to the actual content of the policy brief. After this, we move on to once you have finalized your network, you know that who do you seek information from? What are your sources going to look like? How do you decide that the literature that you have come across, whether that is relevant or not? Because it's quite possible that the literature that you come across could be primary or secondary. It could be published literature or gray literature. It could be a single study or a body of evidence. So how do you really pick the ones which are most relevant to you and the most appropriate to your own policy brief or your policy question? So we'll try to distinguish that what are all these different types of evidence and what would that mean for your policy question. In terms of the types of evidence, this is again from module 1, as you would have seen, that there are 4 types. First is data, then citizen evidence, the best practices, and the research. These were the 4 types that all of you are already aware of. Now we look at the sources of evidence. You will find that there are multiple sources. It could be World Bank, different UN agencies. It could be International Monetary Fund. It could be your library. It could be the books and the journals that you refer to. And third is the types of literature, which we'll quickly go through in the next slide. And finally, the evidence product. How you can understand evidence product is that if you were to draft your policy brief by following these steps in the evidence-based policy making process, you will have a product towards the end of it. And that is what is your policy brief is all about. It is an evidence product which is created by you by using these different steps. Other examples could be a book, a report, a video interview, or a journal article, just other evidence products that you can come across while you are searching for your policy question. Now we'll quickly do an exercise wherein, since most of you understand that what is primary literature and what is secondary literature, you'll see that primary is the raw data collected, wherein you have the original data, data is accessed with you, where data is collected. Secondary is wherein the data has already been published, it's already out there in open access, and you are using it. So just a very basic example of primary literature would be if there is any data or any report published on the data used from the census. It could be a survey conducted by the state, by the country. That becomes your primary data. Now, the secondary data would be if using a report that's already published, you write a report on the same topic. That becomes a second level of research, and that is why it becomes a secondary literature. So now that we have that, let's find out that what are the following examples going to be like. So you will see that we have the first one, which is responses from surveys. So now you can unmute yourself and share your view on whether it will go in primary or it will go in the secondary literature. Left or right?
Left.
Any initial thoughts? Left?
Primary,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other thoughts? Primary,
Es-
Primary.
Yeah.
right?
Especially if
Okay.
it's the raw responses.
Right, yes. The responses from surveys directly, yes. Absolutely, that will be primary. The second is experiment and statistical data. Where would that go? This could be a tricky one,
I think that is
but
primary.
you can
Yeah,
Primary, yes.
Okay.
primary.
Okay. So, okay, we have consensus. Primary then.
I think it's primary.
Yes. Right. Perfect. Now the third one, fieldwork and interviews.
Primary.
Also
Primary.
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 Primary, yeah.
Right. Absolutely correct. Yes. This is primary too. Next one, journal articles.
Secondary.
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 Right. Literature reviews.
Secondary.
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 Perfect.
Secondary.
And books.
Also
Secondary.
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 Secondary. Okay, perfect. So we are all clear on what is the distinction between primary and secondary, and you can use which ones are more appropriate for your policy question by deciding that what is the request or what is the topic that you are focusing on. For example, there are many research papers that combine both primary and secondary. So that is also something that you can do. It's not that you have to pick between A or B, between primary or secondary. You can also pick both of these ways, except that when you are writing your policy brief, which is to be submitted in the next couple of weeks, you may not find much time to take up primary research unless you have already at your workplace completed a study or a research on the same topic as your policy issue. In that case, you will have the primary data readily available. But otherwise, most of the policy briefs that we receive are based on secondary literature. Now, this is again the definitions of primary and secondary literature. In the primary, you will see that it is original documents that contain raw material or first-hand information. The first-hand information is critical to understanding what is primary data. The second one is that it is written about a primary source. It could be interpretations or discussions about existing primary sources. So you will see that it is journal articles, literature review books, as you all correctly spotted. Now, this is a distinction between published literature or gray literature. You will find that usually we have a tendency to prefer published literature because these are research or evidence products which are created and documented by the commercial publishing industry, which could be books, journal articles, which are not necessarily controlled by the published literature are always given in a certain format and there is liberty that they exercise. With the gray literature, you will find that there is a broad category which refers to documents produced by government, businesses, NGOs in formats that are not typically controlled by the commercial publishing industry. So you will see that you will be using a combination of both of these. You will find that there is certain information that you find in journal articles, as many of you had posted on the eCampus platform, uh, that there were these snapshots of the newspaper or a journal that you had captured and shared with us from a decent work issue from your country. And if we look at the other literature that we have also shared with you during your assignments, or it could be the reports that you have talked about in the previous sessions from your countries, or what are the challenges in data that you have seen come across, all of that would constitute the gray literature. So you'll see that it's all a combination that you will be using in drafting your policy brief, a combination of primary, secondary, published, and gray literature. Now let's find out that which types of literature do you use most often. You can feel free to unmute yourself or put the answer in the chat. Now that you are all experts in what are the types of literature that we have just seen in the previous slide, primary, secondary, published, gray, then which is the one that you typically use or you most often use at your workplace? Secondary. Okay. I see a couple of you who have also used primary, which is great. I see from Philippines, but yes, most of you are using secondary, and both as well. Even, I mean, personally, I prefer using both. If the time allows, having both primary and secondary is the best case scenario that you can have. But since we are always working under deadlines, we are only able to focus on the secondary one. Mostly gray literature. Yes, Sarah, that's precisely how it is. Secondary for academic work, but the first for work. Right. We'll see that for academic work, you'll find that many of the researchers are using primary data. There are so many surveys that are undertaken by professors or academicians in the global south, wherein they are conducting studies and collecting primary data. So they also come up with a lot of information on research, or they have many evidence products emerging from that area. But essentially, yes, it has to be a combination, as I said before. Now, the one point to remember is that there are many different types of literature and evidence products, but understanding the difference between them will allow you to make an informed decision that which is going to be most useful for your research. So now that all of you know what are the different types, you will be in a better position to decide that what literature type is going to be most beneficial and most aligned to the policy question that you have. Now, the next step in the process would be choosing your sources, that what would be the best way to find the literature. These are just some of the questions that you can select. You can ask even the network that you come across, because they would already be aware of the sources out there, which journals to access, and if you have to access a library, what are the different literatures that you will need. Within this, we have tried to segregate, bifurcate into two types. One is the internal sources, and second is the external sources. So in the first one, you will see that internal is typically that covers the agencies within your country, the ministries and the departments, wherein the public sector agencies are disseminating information or generating annual reports and the data that they produce at their capacity. The second will be the external sources, which are outside of the public sector or the state-led activities. You will see that the examples could include think tanks, civil society organization, international organizations, even ILO would come under this. So the idea here is that you take a pick, whatever your topic is. If it is, say, social protection in your country, you can again take a bunch of internal sources wherein you look at the different welfare programs run by the government and the reports that they have published. You take that for a part of your policy brief and you try to give information using that. At the same time, you can use external sources. For example, you can use publications by the ILO that how does social protection look like in other developing countries, if there are any best practices that you can take from their publications and use it for your policy brief. So the idea would be to use a combination of these, which would allow you to have a very solid foundation of your policy brief, wherein you are trying to answer the question that you have decided, the policy issue that you have decided for this assignment. Now you will see that internal and external sources are not mutually exclusive. And in many cases, you will need both to find a balanced approach, just exactly as I was saying a second before. Now, what are the different types of sources? You will see that there is this tree of sources that we have tried to depict here, wherein you'll see different kinds of sources that we have used previously to work on our research. If you like, you can also take a snapshot of this, because the more number of sources that you consult to answer your policy question, the more informed your policy brief is going to come across, because that ways you are able to cover the different elements, different perspectives of the different stakeholders within the system. You will also see in the end at the right bottom that there is your own experience. This will definitely give you a direction as to uh, the kinds of experiences or the work that you have undertaken before at your workplace, or in general, the background that you come from. How does that define your perspective? How do you look across the solutions or the recommendations that you will provide in your policy brief? And all of that will be combined by all set of these sources, which is universities, libraries, statistics agency, internet, just all of that, a combination of that will be how it looks like. Now, in terms of online sources, we have given a few examples here. Feel free to look those up. I'm sure that you will at least be using one of these when you undertake research for your policy brief. Google Scholar is one such resource wherein you will find multiple research papers by multiple researchers, and it's an excellent source that I personally use a lot. You can just directly go on Google Scholar and type in your topic, and you will find the different research or evidence products that have already been published in the past. Now, some useful ILO's databases that we'll talk about in the coming slides. But other than that, if we look at the ones on the right hand side, you will see that you can, there are 3 website links that are given. Again, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, and there's another one, ssrn.com, wherein you will find different academic journals and reports, and you will be able to get a very fair idea of the topic that you are researching on, and what are the elements that you can pick and choose for your own policy topic. Now, diving in a bit on ILO research, the first product that you have here is the NormLex. This is one area, or this is just one stop shop solution wherein you can just go, you can look at the international labor standards, you can look at the ratification information for your specific country. We were just talking about the C190 in one of the previous slides. You can just go in, you can look at the country profile, even if you directly open this page, NormLex on ILO website, you will see that you can pick the different country profiles out of those, and you can just enter your country. Now you can further search for any particular area that you want to look for. What are the conventions that have been ratified by your country, and what are the recommendations that have been provided in regards to your country again. So this is one resource that is an absolute must if you are researching for your policy brief. The other one is ILO Stat. It is again one-stop shop for finding information on labor statistics, And the best part is it's free access. You can just go ahead, look up your topic. It could be child labor, it could be minimum wage compliance, it could be occupational safety and health. You can just directly go there and update yourself, apprise yourself of the different concepts and definitions that you will need to know to draft your policy briefs. Now, finally, the last step, which is searching effectively, that now that you have come this far, you have uh, identified your sources, you have mapped your network, you have understood the types of literature that you want to use. Now, what do you do next? The last step is to search effectively. That with all the information that you have gathered so far, how do you, in record time, because you will have limited time to work on your policy brief and also on the other deliverables that you work on at your workplace. In the limitation of time, how do you filter your results in a manageable list? What are the keywords that you should look up when you are searching online? So let's take an example. If you are working on social protection, what you can do is you can the terms and concepts that you had come across in the second step of the search strategy, where you are familiarizing yourself with the topic, you would have come across different topics, right? So you can use those terms directly and put it on the Google search engine or any other search engine and try to have these topics divided within subtopics. For example, in the subtopic, you'll see there is decent work, there is good jobs, jobs with rights. So these different terms can be listed out when you are still searching for your policy brief issue. And you can use this one after the other, wherein you will find that the related terms could also be looked up. For example, unemployment, underemployment. And this will lead you to evidence products that are directly linked or indirectly linked to your policy issue. And this will make your policy brief more informed. These are again a few examples that if you are looking at employment, then you can directly look up. The way to search on Google would be to use the word "and" that you can put in female and employment to get results that are covering female employment. So this could be just one of the ways wherein we have provided some tips and techniques on how you can look this up. I think we are right at the 1 hour end. Yes, I think it's around 3 o'clock. So next up we have breakout rooms activity. But I think before that we can probably take a break of about 5 minutes, if that's okay. If required, it can also be 10 minutes. Nareen, what do you think?
Can we do 10?
We can do 10. Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. So
sure.
Let's do 10.
Thanks, Bhavika. Yeah, great job. Thank you. So have a 10-minute break. When we come back, we will do some activities together in breakout groups. But just to let you know that what Bhavika mentioned in terms of the search strategies, the 6 steps. I mean, there is no one solution. That's what she mentioned. But this is more methodic, where you go step by step. But you can do as you feel like. But these, if you follow these steps, you are sure not to miss out anything, and you'll not reinvent the wheel, because other people have, I'm sure, must have looked at your policy question before. So if you follow these steps, you will be more efficient. With this, let's have a break for 10 minutes. Vincenzo or Sophie, whoever is doing the
I'm going to
two quick questions, Naren.
Yep.
I put a question in the chat whether we could do joint policy briefs.
Yeah. Okay. Whether you could do joint policy briefs, I always have this question, in fact, whether people want to work together because you are in the same country, same topic, indeed. But since this training is individually based, that we want to see your skills in drafting, of course, you can do it together. I have no problem. But my preference, if you'd ask me, is to do it by yourself at the first stage. Maybe on a later stage where you have done all the credentials with us, you can then combine your heads together and put it together. Why not? But as a first step, if you won't mind, Andre, I would prefer that we do it individually just to see your skills has been developed, and then secondly you can do it collectively at a national level. Does that answer your question?
Thanks much. Yes, it does.
Second
Great.
question.
I was wrong. I had just one question.
Okay. Any other questions before we just break off for 10 minutes? Okay.
Okay, let's have a break of 10 minutes and we will reconvene. So at the end of the video, as you know, and it will be 3:20 Geneva time. Recording. So over to you. Thank you, Bhavika.
Thank you. Thanks, Vincenzo. All right. So hopefully we are back with some more energy because now we are going to have breakout rooms. We know that there hasn't been any chance for you all to interact amongst each other so far. So this is finally the first opportunity wherein we will be randomly dividing you into 4 breakout rooms, and there will be a discussion that you will be taking up amongst your members for about 10 minutes. I'll quickly share my slides after this for you to know what is to be discussed, what is the topic, what is the case study. But just generally speaking, the structure is going to look like this, that there will be 4 groups, group A, B, C, and D. Group A and B will be working on one case study, one question that you will try to answer, and there will be group C and D who will again have the same common question and you will try to answer. 10 minutes for discussion within the room, wherein you will try to come up with answers. You can discuss with your colleagues what they think about the question, what are their thoughts from their own experiences in their country. And then all of us will come back to this main meeting and
We cannot hear you, Bhavika. Apparently, your video now is freezed. Let's wait a few seconds. It is only me, or you're having the same issues? I get we are okay. Okay, sorry for this.
All right, I'll take it from here. No worries. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So the idea is to divide you into 4 groups. Bhavika mentioned group A and B will be doing one case study and C and D another. Bhavika, are you back? Bhavika, are you back?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah. Now take over. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Naren. Lost my network in there. Yes. So just to continue, that the idea is that there will be 10 minutes for discussion within the breakout room. And then all of us will come back to the main meeting. And then we'll again have a debrief, a discussion on what were the answers that you came up with. I'll just start to share my screen and I'll just turn my video off. I think I have a low bandwidth.
Bhavika, can you please confirm if you have already created the breakout on your own? Because
Vincenzo, I think you will have to do that. I'm just sharing my screen so that we can go through the case study together.
Okay.
Yes. So we have this case study on youth unemployment in Africa. I would have to ask if anybody would want to volunteer reading this, after which we can go through the questions. So any volunteers to read this?
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Sarah. Please go ahead.
The youth population in sub-Saharan Africa is increasing rapidly. Nearly 1 in 3 people living in the region, or about 297 million, is between the ages of 10 and 24. By 2050, the age group is projected to nearly double to about 561 million. According to PRB's The World's Youth 2013 data sheet. The youth of the region are also becoming better educated. Estimates show that the proportion of 20 to 24-year-olds who complete secondary education will increase from 42% to 59% over the next 20 years. Consequently, as sub-Saharan Africa's workforce becomes larger and better educated, there is an overwhelming potential for economic growth and development. Countries must take the opportunity to cultivate the capacity of their youth, a valuable resource for their prosperity. Youth employment remains a barrier to the region's development. Some of the highest rates of the continent are in Southern Africa, where 51% of young women and 43% of young men are unemployed. This large unemployed population indicates lost potential, since communities and nations fail to benefit from what the young people could theoretically contribute. Also, difficulties finding and sustaining employment detract from a young person's lifetime productivity and earnings, making it more challenging to escape poverty.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Sarah. So we see that this article, or just this background that's given to you, you will see different statistics around how many people in the age group of 20 to 24 years old have completed secondary education, and how has the development looked like for the African region. Now, this case study will be, as you can see already, will be focused on youth unemployment in Africa. And there will be 2 case studies that you'll try to answer. I'll just make one change, just a second. Yes. So you see that there are 2 case studies, case A and case B. Group 1 and 2 will try to answer the following part, that imagine that you are a part of a tripartite commission that has been mandated to prepare a short brief about tackling youth unemployment in order to inform policy leading to formalization, job creation, and better working conditions. Now, this is a task for group 1 and 2. For group 3 and 4, it will be that you are asked by your boss to prepare some points on the ways to establish a stronger social protection towards decent work. to help the boss prepare for an interview with the national television, and you have, say, 24 hours to give her some talking points. Now, some instructions for you to structure your thoughts or to structure your discussion when you are divided in your breakout rooms is that you need to discuss how you would design a search strategy. Now that you know the 6 steps of the search strategy, how would you use those and provide the basis for the policy mechanisms working towards your case study or your case question? Now, there are in particular 2 questions that we want you to discuss. First is that what would be your steps in the search strategy? How would you implement or execute your strategy? How would that breakdown look like? Second would be what sources of evidence would be needed and how would you use them? So I would encourage you to probably take a screenshot or take a picture from your mobile phone of this particular slide, because this covers the 2 questions that you will have to discuss within your breakout room. I'll be on this for another 5 seconds. Hopefully, you've all had a chance to take a snapshot. Now, the other one is this. Since the groups have not been divided yet, you do not know which group you will be a part of. So I would encourage you to take a snapshot of this as well.
Okay, please confirm if you can go ahead and create all the rooms, Bhavika. Shall I go?
Just a second, Vincenzo.
Okay.
They might need this information as well. If you feel that you will need this, you can go ahead and take a snapshot of this as well. Otherwise, since the questions are pretty generic in terms of your search strategy, you may not need this as much. But still, if you want it, you can take a snapshot of this as well. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and we'll move on to the breakout rooms. Hopefully, you've all been allotted to your breakout rooms. We'll also be stepping in the middle to guide you if there's any question that you might have, and you can direct it to us. Vincenzo, would it be possible to also add a timer for 10 minutes?
Yes, don't worry. I will inform them when 2 minutes are left, and then I will automatically after 10 minutes the rooms will be closed. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. All right. So be very careful with the time. 10 minutes go by very quickly. So hopefully you will be able to structure your discussion around it and all of you get to interact with one another. Vincenzo, over to you.
Sure. The timer is on. Okay, now you can join the room.
Thank you.
It was brutal, no? Like you just had to be cut out. I know they're in the middle of the discussions, you know. Yeah, sorry about that, but yeah, please, Bhavika, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm sure that the time that we all had, there will be some interesting ideas beaming. So let's get started on that. Let's first have group 1. And I would request if anyone from the group would like to volunteer and share the discussion that they had. And before sharing their insights and their answers, if you could just give us a brief about what your case was about and then proceed with your responses, that would be great. So over to you, group 1.
So
Yes, thank you, Bhavika.
Group 1 was Andre, Donald, Gloria Litza, who is going to present, Nara Simhan and Narendra. They were very proactive.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Beatrice. So, I will be presenting in behalf of Group 1. So, as I mentioned earlier, I did not volunteer. I was voluntold. So, for Group 1, our case would be we are a tripartite commission that has been mandated to prepare a short brief about tackling youth unemployment in order to inform policy leading to formalization, job creation, and better working conditions. So given the scenario that we were provided, um, we first understand and familiarize ourselves with the issue. So we've seen that there is a rapid growth of youth population in Africa, but there is also an increasing education levels, but unemployment challenges is still persistent. From here, we could see that there is some sort of a mismatch or skills gap, meaning there is a critical need for interventions that would align educational outcomes with labor market demands and the creation of quality jobs. So as a tripartite commission, um, in establishing our networks, we could consider that we have a wider source of networks where we could gather our information. For one, since we are a tripartite commission, we are composed of workers, representatives, employers representatives, and government representatives. And we could actually conduct consultations, especially with the employer sector, to actually identify the skills required, needed in particular industries in the labor market. And also, we could establish our network with the academe and actually consult them as well to help design educational programs that would um, address the mismatch that has been observed in the labor market. And for the types of literature that we will be using, aside from the first-hand information that we will be getting from the consultations, um, we could actually use literature about providing us more information, detailed information about the different industries in the labor market to give us an idea again of what skills needs to be further developed, what skills does different industries require, and also there's been a mention of what are the priority industries of the government as well. So basically, that's where our discussions within the group revolve. So back to you, Babika.
Thanks a lot, Gloria Lisa. These are some excellent points. We'll circle back on these once we have heard the other participants share their insights. So let's go ahead with group 2. Any volunteers for group 2?
We have not voted on that, but I was on note duty, so I hope I have the mandate to share what we talked about. We are desperate on time, but what we did cover, we also have the same issue of youth unemployment in Africa, the same situation, and we also recognize the same issue of a mismatch between the increasingly higher levels of education and the lack of opportunities and jobs that contributes to youth unemployment there. So for the first step, to define our search strategy design, for the first step, we had a cop-out. So in order to understand the request for evidence, we just thought we had to have all of the data on youth unemployment. We must research the causes of youth unemployment and look at any research papers for this. We need to find bottlenecks, be it is it at the education level, is it at the jobs level, just find where is the issue bottlenecking right now, and then identify proper solutions, be it through looking at good practices or research and whatnot. For the second step, to familiarize ourselves with the topic, we'd of course look at some ILO papers. We'd look at the OECD papers on the topic, and we'd look at some World Bank recommendations and usual coverage of youth unemployment in Africa. We would use our networks to contact the ministries in different countries, unions, employment institutions, and NGOs in these target countries so that we get a full picture from different sides. Try to get some qualitative data as well on their takes on why things are happening the way that they are. For the fourth step, to choosing the right types of literature, we also had a cop-out. We'll just use all types of literature. We'll need the primary and the secondary types of literature, both published and gray literature, both quantitative and qualitative, to really get the full picture, even though that is a large undertaking. For the fifth step, to choose our sources, we'll need the employment agency data. We'll need data from the national ministries or the national statistical agencies, and of course, ILOstat. And for the last step, to search effectively, we'll just use the keywords of youth and unemployment and Africa in the databases that we'll be using. For the sources of evidence needed, we sort of already answered that. And how would we use that? We mentioned the ILOstat and the national agencies, but how would we use them? Is first and foremost for the background information brief, where we sort of explain and describe the state of play. We break down the target groups by age, gender, and location, and we look for best practices in tackling youth unemployment elsewhere. Thank you.
Okay, quite a detailed one. Thanks, Rokas. That was great. We'll move to the next group now, group number 3.
I was taking notes, so I guess I will present. It's very difficult to follow Rokas and the group number 2. We don't have the level of detail, but so our group was tasked with coming up with talking points in 24 hours. So we used the process and brainstorm on how to sort of go through the process with that goal in mind. And the first thing that came up is defining the objectives and key questions for the talking points that can inform the interview. The interview is usually a short way to communicate about the problem. And so some of the statistical information were already included, but the idea is coming up with a way to represent the problem during the interview. So we said, in terms of understanding the request of evidence, again, define the objectives in relation to the fact that this is an interview and there is a limited time to prepare the talking points, to establish the stronger social protection. So that's the piece we will be focusing on in going through the process. The second step, which is familiarizing with the topic, we talked about conducting preliminary research, but finding things that are easily available, like literature that is already published out there, secondary information that can complement what we already know was included in the article, but also looking at news outlets and articles and investigative type of investigations carried out by news outlets, but also policy institutes, publications, or think tanks. So anything that can be readily available. In terms of using the network, we talked about quickly sort of identifying experts in that area, among maybe researchers, among government workers, among trade unions, but also community organizations focusing on youth in the labor market. They can be expert in terms of the perspectives and challenges the youth face in entering the labor market. And think tanks and policy institutes, with the caveat that tapping into the network is limited to people you can that are sort of readily available because of that 24-hour time frame. In terms of choosing the right type of literature, we say mostly it probably is going to be secondary literature on the topic, or literature that might combine, also raw data, like statistical data, to provide a broader picture, but also narrow down into the specific issue that we are looking at, which is providing the social protection. And then in terms of choosing our sources, again, we talked about choosing secondary data, most likely probably grey literature, secondary study, labor market studies, but also findings. One thing that came up was in terms of conversation, focus groups and things like that. But knowing that we only have 24 hours, maybe looking for transcripts or information on previous type of social dialogue, conversations, and focus groups that are out there and provide insights on those on challenges in terms of providing social protection. And then in terms of searching effectively, we didn't quite get there, but sort of the idea is providing quantitative information to define the range of the issue, but also include some stories or more qualitative evidence that provide a more nuanced understanding of the topic. And I hope I didn't miss anything. If someone else wants to add anything, please feel free.
You covered it well. So, yeah, okay. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Sarah. Moving on to the last group, group 4. Over to you.
Okay, I'll try. We didn't quite finish, but I'll try to see how much, we can represent our discussion. So in terms of understanding requests for evidence, we understood that we had a 24-hour time frame. We had to report to our boss to help with this interview format. So we were already working under, very straitened circumstances. We understood that she would need bullet points because of the nature of the interview, so that even all the data that we would be providing would have to be something that was concise, that she could, he or she could, access really easily. In terms of key concepts and terminologies, we had to make sure that what do we mean by stronger social protection? So in terms of that, one team member suggested also in terms of latest debates and key issues to examine what was the current coverage and see where there were gaps that needed to be dealt with. We also spoke about some other issues that could fall into this idea of social protection, which would be the role of the informal sector, for example, youth within the informal sector, vulnerable youth, and also in terms of, what role these kinds of, being within the whole notion of vulnerable employment would also contribute to this. In terms of significant stakeholders, obviously it would be the youth, but we would also be looking at those who would be connected to this, that is to say, the employers, NGOs, as a whole. In terms of using our network, we would want to reach out to our academic experts, people that we could access readily, our links at the various ministries. All right, so that would be like ministries of labor, ministries of education, even the specific ministries dealing with youth development. All right. Team members, if I'm missing out anything, please don't hesitate to join in. In terms of the types of literature, because of our time, we would be, relying on secondary literature, but also primary in terms of statistics, because that would be really useful for the interview format in terms of giving what we needed to look at. We also want to focus in terms of choosing sources. A combination of both internal and external sources would work for us. All right. For example, the CSO offices, the respective CSO offices would help with that in terms of internal. In terms of external resources, we would want to look at civil society associations who would be working and actually on the ground dealing with this issue of social protection and also the youth. We would also want to reach out, and this is something that I was talking to Naren about in terms of the role of the cooperative movement that can assist with this issue. All right. And then finally, in terms of the search effectively, our search words would be youth unemployment, vulnerable, informal, and also dropout, because a team member also mentioned that it would be important for us to look at that 10 to 24 age bracket, where you know, we would need to have some targeted initiatives with regard to how we either keeping them in school or, you know, mitigating the vulnerability of that age group. Anything else, team members, that I need to include?
I think you covered it all, Sadiqa. Good job.
All right, thanks.
All right, perfect. Thanks a lot, Sadrika. In the interest of time, I wish we could give a more detailed feedback, but because we are already running over time and we have our application session next, so being mindful of that, I'll just quickly give my feedback in terms of the points that I really liked in each of your responses. For the first group, I really liked the fact that you took the topic of youth unemployment, and it's rather a broad topic. You chose to narrow it down and choose one cause, which is the skills gap, the mismatch in the skills provided by the universities and the skills that the employers are expecting and demanding. And then you narrowed down your research and went through the whole process. I think it was absolutely comprehensive, and you have really understood your task well. I think it was really bang on, and the focus was clear. The presentation delivery was great. You knew what you were talking about, and you were actually addressing the skills mismatch through all the steps that you were covering in the search strategy. So kudos on that. For group two, since youth unemployment is rather broad, I like the approach wherein even before diving into the one cause that you want to focus your research on, you would rather take a step back and examine all the possible causes of why youth unemployment is on the rise, and that is really appreciated. Just that one caveat that as you all the participants would already know, that in the policy brief, uh, that luxury of time may not be there, that you will be able to access the kind of information that you would aspire. That might be a little ambitious to get information from all sorts of sources, from the government, from the civil society, get all the data in one place, talk to all the partners and stakeholders. But the approach for that is absolutely bang on. That is how it is to be done. If there is more time, and if the evidence product has to be a research paper, then this is exactly how the core research looks like. So you have done a great job in understanding the search strategy. Just one caveat, as I said before, if it is for policy brief, then that nature of search strategy might have to be pivoted a bit. For group three, the one thing that stood out for me was that you really focused on the 24 hours time limit, and you mentioned that you will access the transcripts on social dialogue, the discussions that have happened through focus groups. I really like that point because that's probably the easiest way to tap into different sources of information within a day's time. And alongside the other sources that you mentioned, how you will come across the bullet points. So I think great job. It's not going to be easy to draft those pointers for your boss in a day's time, but you are already halfway there if you have these basics sorted out. So great job there. For group number 4, I liked that how you started off with saying that you will first try to decode what social protection means in the first place, because the idea is to establish a stronger social protection. So, in terms of a talking point and how that for that interview, your boss would have to prepare the first point, if it comes across on what is social protection in the first place. I think that's an excellent addition, wherein one will be able to pivot the discussion going forward and also cover the current debates that you mentioned in your response, that since it's an interview, it's always advisable that the aspect of the current debate is covered in the response. So I think all in all, congratulations to all of you. It shows that all the steps that we covered today in the search strategy have been understood appropriately, and that you are on that path to working towards, even for your own search strategy for your policy question. Now I'll just take a couple of minutes to tell you that what are the next steps for you on the eCampus. Since we did not have much time to discuss these answers, feel free to have the discussion forum at your disposal. We do not have any particular discussion topic outlined for the searching evidence module. So please feel free to go ahead, and you can also use your case study that we just discussed. If you have any questions, you have any comments, feel free to start your discussion on the discussion forum. Other than that, you'll see that there is an assignment on the eCampus, wherein you will find there are supporting materials that you can go through, and it will only help you in your evidence search. And there are different resources that we have put together. It's a PDF that you can download from the reading materials, and you will be able to access it. In terms of the assignment, what you have is an article on the following, which is the number of child laborers has increased for the first time in 20 years, which was published by The Economist in 2021. You'll also see this nice graphic representation of how it looks like for different regions of the world. And we only want you to answer one question, that what is your impression concerning the various evidence pieces used in the article? And in your opinion, has the author made enough search and used the correct set of evidence? So now that you have understood search strategy, you have gone through this module, hopefully you should be able to answer that if the author, in your opinion, has made enough search, or it's just trying to get down to one particular conclusion and all the evidences are pointing towards it. So now that you know the different types of literature out there, you will be able to make a fair judgment of that as well. And with that, I hand it over back to Vincenzo, and we can move ahead with the application session. Over to you.
Thank you, Bhavika. Thank you for your insightful session. And yes, now we're going ahead. As you know, as already informed, so at the end of each webinar that will be managed by Bhavika, Naren, and also by other colleagues from the ILO stats, we're going to have a specific application. And so that's why today we have the pleasure to have here with us Bert Müller. Naren, I don't know if I can go ahead on my own and introduce Bert, or you would like to introduce him? Okay.
Please go ahead. I mean, if I'll introduce, I'll take another 10 minutes just to introduce him.
Okay. So I don't want to take any more time from Bert's presentation, so just few words. Bert is in charge of the employment policy and analysis program here at the ITCLO, so the program that is jointly offering this course together with the ILO research department. He has been working several years in South Africa in the area of employment policies. Today is going to introduce to present his application on NEP, on national employment policies. And just to add further information, Bert also holds a PhD at SOAS University, where has been conducting research in East Africa about fair trade, employment, poverty eradication. So don't want to take any more time from your presentation, Bert. So thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Vincenzo, and hi again, everyone. Good to be with you. And thanks, Bhavika and Naren, for a very good session so far. Vincenzo, how much time do I have?
15 minutes, let's say 15, 20 minutes. Also because maybe there would be a few minutes more for a Q&A, brief Q&A.
Well, if whatever I have to say is interesting enough and would make you ask any questions, we're just happy to sign off afterwards, but let's see. All right, thanks so much. I actually decided to give you just some practical examples from my experience over the years, particularly in Africa, from a sectoral perspective. I decided to not just look into national employment policies, because that in itself can be a bit abstract and a bit dry. And I feel as soon as you go to the sectoral level, things become a bit more hands-on. And let's see, I will not go into detail how to do research for these policies. I just wanted to give you a few examples to sort of make this a bit more real, maybe, if indeed that is needed. But first, before I go into concrete, I'll do something very abstract, but I hope it makes the point quite real. often when we talk about sectoral policies and an employment creation there, I will talk about employment and employment creation. At the sectoral level, we talk about linkages between sectors and employment elasticities. I don't want to bore you with that or go into any detail, but I think you'll get the point very quickly. When you want to create jobs in any economy, you don't just look at one sector where you create the jobs, but actually the whole economy that's linked to that. Case in point, very abstract, would be the sector A that you see there. Let's say this could be the automotive sector, for example. Imagine you would be able to enhance the production in that sector through whatever policy by 100 units, and we assume the sector has an employment elasticity of 0.4. That would mean you would create 40 jobs. We don't need to go into the nitty-gritty of what elasticity means and so on. Let's just say you manage to create 100 more cars, and that creates, or 100,000 more cars, and that creates 40 jobs. Now, it doesn't stop there. To create cars, you need tires, you need seats, you need windows, you need engines, and so on. So there's other sectors like the steel industry, whatever, that also need to then provide the inputs into those cars. So you have these other sectors, B, C, D, and they need to also produce more in order for more cars to be built. So they also create jobs. That's what we call backward linkages, right? So these are very arbitrary figures, just for example's sake. But then also beyond that, the cars will be used. Let's say they're tractors, or buses. They will be used in the transport industry. They will be used on construction sites, whatever it might be. They will go directly to consumption. So those sectors, you could argue, if they have access to cheaper vehicles of some sort or another, that could also have a stimulative effect on their production, and more jobs could also be expected to create it there. Bottom line, you'll see very soon where I'm going with this. If we manage to increase the production of 100,000 cars, it's not only going to be the 40 jobs created in this red sector A, but you create, in this fictitious example, 108 jobs across the value chain, right? I hope you're with me. Again, it's a completely fictitious example. Let's look at another sector very briefly. Sector X, again, 100,000 units will be created, 40 jobs. But here, most of the inputs will be imported. So fewer jobs there will be created domestically. And most of whatever Sector X is producing will go outside the country. So also so actually in this fictitious example, because it's much less linked to the local economy, rather than you still create the same 40 jobs in that one sector, but overall in your country, you only, let's say, again, fictitiously, you create 53 jobs. I want to give you this example, because of course, this makes a lot of sense in an abstract term from a theoretical point of view. But I hope if you see this, you realize why now this research is so important, because how do we know which one is your sector A, which one is your sector X, and so on? So it's really important to use the right research methods, and we could talk about that in much more detail. I don't have time for that, but we could talk about social accounting matrices, input-output models, and all sorts of sometimes quite advanced research that needs to go into that to determine what in theory is a good idea, but in practice might be quite different depending very much on what type of sectors you stimulate. So I thought this could be quite a good illustration why this research is very important, even though in theory there's a good idea, right? Let me go back to reality now. I'll give you two examples. I should be quite quick, and then we can talk about it a little bit. The first one is about the recycling industry in South Africa. South Africa, frankly, does not have really a big recycling industry. But what you see here on that picture is a waste sorting plant in the province of, or in the area around Cape Town. So you see this big hole there, you see the workers there who are sorting through all the different types of rubbish, plastic, metal, paper, and so on and so forth. And actually quite interestingly, that sorted rubbish then is actually going to be exported at a profit, I think even to Thailand and different types of countries. And the plant itself is owned by the municipality. So it is a policy decision. It was a policy decision to build that plant to stimulate that particular quite innovative sector in their context, and that does stimulate job creation there. And then the workers itself are, the plant is given to a subcontractor, and so all these workers there that you see there are privately recruited by a private company, who then is given access to the plant and then gets the rubbish sorted and sells it in a sorted fashion at a profit. So this is actually a good example of a sectoral policy at the local level that can stimulate jobs in a very innovative way. Unfortunately, there's a second side to that picture that is maybe not immediately visible. If you look a bit further at the end there's a huge part of that section that is basically idle. It's not very clear on the picture, but it is. And what actually happened at the time when I took this picture there is that the South African rand had depreciated. For whatever reason, that huge assembly line and sorting machinery had been, there had been a faulty issue. They needed a replacement part. And that replacement part was, of course, imported, had to be bought in dollars, and it was unaffordable to the municipality again. So they were not able to maintain that big piece of machinery. Secondly, when I spoke to the facility manager there and the company that's running this whole thing, they were saying they were actually kicking themselves in their backside, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, for having bought that big piece of equipment in the first place at huge capital expense, when the same job could have been done manually in a labor-intensive fashion and probably would have employed 2-3 times as many workers, and the same job with the same type of quality and so on. The same business could have been done with just many more jobs to be created. So it's a nice example of a good idea that was badly implemented in a sense. And clearly this wouldn't have happened if the municipality had applied a bit more research of really understanding the context, understanding the capital expenditure that needed to be, the risk is sorted, and maybe also paid a bit more attention to the labor issues underlying, rather than using this big sorting plant as a prestige object, like a political, can I say, show-off project, so to speak, which they did at the time, about a good 10 years ago or so. So that's example one where something might look very good, but then on the other hand, had they put a little bit more research into it, probably the results could have been even better. My second example comes from Ethiopia. So in the early 2000s, the Ethiopian government was very keen to promote job-rich sectors. Of course, especially at the time, but still now, the developing country, high population growth, lots of poverty and so on. Quite sadly, even at that time, still very famous for that, if you think of the Ethiopian famine and so on, which was still very fresh on people's minds in the early 2000s. So what they did is they engaged in very dedicated public-private sector and academic dialogue to identify the right sectors to stimulate job creation. So that was a research activity. They spoke with the private sector, they spoke with academics, researchers, sectoral experts, and so on. They came up with the flower sector, and they realized the agroecological conditions are excellent in the country to produce flowers. In 2003, the flower sector was virtually non-existent in the country. They had maybe 1 or 2 farms, effectively. And then the government started to very actively, and that was the policy here, very actively incentivize flower investment through tax holidays, easy inputs of capital infrastructure, very easy access to transport infrastructure, which is important in the flower sector because it needs to be delivered freshly. So Ethiopian Airlines was giving very favorable rates for the transport of flowers, and several other incentives. Long story short, by 2010, just 10 years later, there were a large number of farms, hundreds in fact. They employed around 75,000 workers. That's a conservative estimate, and 70% of them are women. So a huge success story in sectoral growth through very targeted government intervention policy based on research, based on public-private dialogue and research, and finding the right sector, and really asking the actors there, what do you need for us for increasing that production and jobs in that sector. Unfortunately, also here the story doesn't quite end there. But let me give you this demonstration of what it looked like. So this is a picture of a town of Ziway in 2001, a satellite image. And just over 10 years later, it looks like that. And you can, of course, see very clearly here the flower farms that were there. The greenhouses is massive. This is 2 kilometers one side. I mean, if you stand next to it, you don't see the end of it. So this is how it looks before. You still see the fields there. And then you see how the flower farms within less than 10 years have mushroomed there, and even the town has expanded. So a huge success story, one would think. And many jobs indeed were created, particularly for poor and rural people and many women. Unfortunately, also here, the picture is not entirely rosy, pun intended, but there were many cases of severe labor abuses, a huge environmental impact in terms of the pesticides used on the flower farm. And actually what you see there on the right of that picture is a lake, the Lake of Ziway, and there's huge loss in water, and the water levels are dropping because of flower production being extremely water intensive. Many traditional livelihoods and small farmers had to yield, of course, and in fact there's a huge increase in crime. So also here I wanted to use this as an example in the hope it could be interesting to illustrate some of these things, how maybe here as well we could argue there's a case of incomplete research. The implementation has been rushed. It was done in a way that not enough attention was paid to labor issues, in particular the protection of workers. Here growth was single-handedly pursued without indeed due respect or thought given to perhaps social and socioeconomic issues and so on. Just to give you another example, but perhaps these are illustrating in a way how research is so vital in coming up with these type of growth stories and these positive stories. Final slide for me here. I would like to encourage you to go to this website, which is in fact the Employment Policy Action Facility that was recently launched by the ILO Employment Department. And there you will see, you'll have a wealth of resources there. So click through it. I can't show you everything here, but what is particularly there is the Employment Diagnostics Toolbox, which I haven't presented here, but it should be fairly self-explanatory if you look through it. But you will find like a lot of tools, resources, ways of how to do the employment diagnostics that indeed are so very important to go into any sort of policy decisions, be it a national employment policy as a whole, sectoral policies, maybe macroeconomic policies, and so on. Please have a look. You'll find a lot of interesting stuff there that I'm sure we could also discuss maybe at a later stage of the course. Let me leave it there in the interest of time, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you so much for your presentation, this specific focus on sectoral policies, these two very interesting case studies, and also for, let's say, showing us also the other side of the coin of these specific sectoral policies and what happens when there is this specific approach and a connection with research. So let's open the floor. If you have any question, let's try to have, a quick Q&A with Bert. Do you have any question, specific comment on Bert's presentation? Feel free, as always, just to unmute yourself and take the floor. Okay. Yeah, please, Riefda.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Mueller, and thank you for the thought-provoking presentation. It's ironic that you are using South Africa as a case study, so I'm going to jump in there immediately. I really love the case study on Cape Town in particular and the waste management referencing. What I would like to get an understanding of is there's research, and as Naren has consistently drawn attention to, is that policy is politics. Given the situation of the fluctuating economic factors, i.e. in this instance, the value of the exchange rate, and then the inability to be able to continue investment. Yeah, naturally, I am conflicted because I come from the worker background. So how do we marry the two situations where, number one, your research informs your strategy, but ultimately inability to hit home the issue with regards to the actual implementation. So how then, without rushing, because you're trying to create employment, looking at the environmental factors at the same time, do we then try and find those solutions that we can use together to get to that, brilliant employment scenarios without having to break the bank? I'm just so interested, but at the same time, looking at the Ethiopian case study and, how the two are so similar, but different in many aspects also. But thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Liefdank, and good to hear your voice, of course. Since maybe for the others who don't know, Rifta and I, we have worked together when I was still in Pretoria, as I told you at the opening. That's why I'm saying this. Just briefly, maybe as a reaction, I think there could have been other ways of doing the same thing. So I think there could have been an option had these things been anticipated for doing a similar job, a similar type of recycling industry with less capital intensive expenditure. So perhaps that way the labor costs would have been a bit higher, a bit lower capital costs, and maybe then that there would have been a fear that the margins, maybe from a certain extent, from a business perspective, would have been a bit lower, but arguably it could have been a more sustainable way of running that business. Certainly that could have been explored. And indeed, when I talked to the facility manager back then, that was in 2016, 17 maybe, so it's a few years ago now, but I remember very acutely that the facility manager then admitted, of course informally, but he told me in his view they made the wrong choice. They wouldn't have needed this huge piece of machinery, and instead could have done the same job just as fine with more workers, but then also less exposure to exchange rate risks in this case. So I do think there would have been alternatives if they would have paid a bit more attention to these things.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Riefda. Any further question from the floor? So I don't know. As always, feel free just to please, Naren.
Great. Great job, Ben. I loved your session. We learned a lot, especially on your two examples that you gave. It's beautiful, like what to do, what not to do. It's great. And Rivda mentioned about, even though you have the best evidence out there, but then the politics comes in, and which is absolutely true. And she was saying that she comes from a workers background, and that's the sense of here we're talking about the DNA of ILO. So even if you have contradictory information, even if you don't agree to that, whatever is found, whatever evidence is there, ILO has this DNA magic bullet. We have what we call the social dialogue mechanisms, and that's where the consensus is. Even if you don't agree, come to a balanced approach where you might agree. And I think South Africa is quite unique in the sense that Ben, you know that they have this tripartite plus structure, tripartite plus, where not only the workers, employers, and governments is together, but they bring other youth organizations, civil society organizations, and that's beautiful, isn't it? So even in the face of contradictory evidence, the best component is to go well prepared in negotiation and come to consensus. And that's what we want to emphasize here more, that try to have consensus. And I'm sure that will take you a long way. Anyway, Ben, thank you very much for enlightening us. I really enjoyed your session.
Can I react very briefly to one thing?
Please,
It will be
please,
very
yeah.
quick. One important thing that we shouldn't discount, and I'm sure you mentioned this in your sessions as well. Social dialogue itself is an important form of research. There's many instances, the Ethiopian one is a good example, where the best academics in the world will not necessarily have the answers, but actually you need to speak with workers' representatives, you need to speak with businesses who ultimately have their wallets and their skin in the game, so to speak, to really tell you where are the opportunities, what would work, what will not work, that many academics, I include myself there, will not have the answers to. Right, so don't forget that social dialogue process itself can be an important source for your research findings, in my view. I would argue that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Bert, also for this last, but definitely not least, even actually very important reflection on social dialogue. So once again, thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you, Naren, for introducing the session. Thank you, Bhavika, for exceptionally leading today's session. And finally, thank you, Bert, for this very insightful application of final application and presentation. So thank you so much to everyone. We're going to have the next session next Wednesday. As always, do not forget to go ahead with the evaluation, otherwise you will not be able to join the next module. Bhavika, I don't know if you would like to add anything else from your side, Naren as well. I mean, over to you, and thank you so much.
Yeah, before Bhavika comes in, I just want to mention, thank you very much, Bhavika. Thank you, Ben, for providing all these important lessons to us and going through all the search strategy, Bhavika. What I want to mention here is I'm so glad that you all have your policy questions, and now we will now build on step by step in drafting your policy brief. So today's assignment, as Bhavika mentioned, please try to find out some of your evidence that you will get online, and the ones that you will use, provide the reference as it was mentioned in the template, and we'll take it from there. Because if you don't do it now, today, for this assignment, the thing that we'll do on Wednesday, you won't be able to move further, because we will be appraising those evidence that you will get for this module. So please just bear with us. We'll go step by step, and I really trust you guys. It's fantastic topics you have, and I love the energy and the spirit you have. So thank you very much. Over to you, Bhavika.
Sure. Thanks, Nareen. I echo Nareen's words. Highly encourage you to go through your evidence pieces. What is it that you would like to use for your policy brief? And if possible, try to have that list ready, up and running in the document that you're working on. Other than that, just one point before we say goodbye for this session is that the link for book a meeting is open, as I shared in the previous session. We already have 4 participants who have booked a meeting with us, and we will be getting back to them. They have requested for a meeting in week 3 and 4. So if you have any questions, any pressing concerns that you would like to bring up to us, you would like to discuss with either me or Nareen or both of us, you can go ahead, access book a meeting at the bottom of your eCampus page, and hopefully we'll connect with you soon one-on-one. And with that, I think that's all for today. Over to you, Vincenzo.
Great. So thank you so much. Thank you all. See you on Wednesday, 2 p.m. Central European Time Zone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.